Hi friends, hello. Today we're going to be discussing the most recent immigration news with me, immigration lawyer Alina Shautsova. We're going to talk about drastic change in Trump's promises with regard to farm workers within this couple of days. We will talk about possible USCIS fee hike, increase of the fees in the months to come. And of course, we will be discussing sanctuary cities' promises or threats against sanctuary cities that Trump administration is passing. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Alina Shautsova. Also, please let me know where you're watching from and type up your questions so that in the end I will be able to refer to them, read them out loud, and answer them for you for free. Again, today we will be discussing recent immigration news like I do almost every Tuesday and Friday. And let's start. A lot going on in immigration, not necessarily positive changes, right? We have news left and right that immigration activists, people who are protesting against immigration enforcement, this very aggressive enforcement, are being detained. Amongst them, for example, are journalists. A Spanish language journalist who was documenting immigration raids was detained by ICE after protest arrest. Another loud, prominent arrest happened just recently, and it involved actually New York City official. Here we go. New York City mayoral candidate. A guy is running for position of the mayor, and he's also, I believe, is a controller of the New York City, was arrested at immigration court. Situation involved him escorting immigrants, helping immigrants to basically feel safer in immigration court, and something basically broke out, some sort of a how to gently phrase it, a disagreement with ICE officers, and this very high public official was detained and arrested. So if people like that get arrested, imagine what happens to regular people, right? Those who do not hold public office. For famous people, whose arrests bring a lot of media spotlight, those people typically are going to be released. And of course, if they're US citizens, they will be released. They have access to lawyers, perhaps even free lawyers if we talk about government officials. But for regular people, the situation is very different. In fact, Trump administration stated that about several hundred of protesters who were arrested during LA protests are going to be deported. And the deportation started already. All right. So you need to know about that. And you just need to be aware of that, of what's going on. Sanctuary cities are under attack by the Trump administration. A lawsuit was filed, and at the same time, almost at the same time, Trump stated he ordered basically ICE to increase enforcement in sanctuary cities. At the same time, governors of sanctuary states like New York are being called to Congress to testify as to what justifies state policies. And here on YouTube channel, I am displaying this piece of news that Governor Hochul defended New York immigration policies, stating that New York State is cooperating with ICE when it comes to criminal charges and criminal convictions, but they would not cooperate with ICE when just a regular person is spotted by local law enforcement who doesn't have status. So that's a big difference between sanctuary cities and non-sanctuary cities or jurisdictions. In non-sanctuary jurisdictions, let's say Florida, if you're spotted and you don't have status, even if it's a routine traffic stop, chances are you will be referred to ICE if you don't have legal status, but not in New York, typically. But here is an interesting situation. Apparently, in one of the counties of New York State, something drastically different took place. There is a county named Oswego, and it's upstate. And sheriff office of that county apparently, allegedly, was involved in racial profiling when they were stopping vehicles that were driven by Hispanic, Spanish looking drivers. And then those drivers, if they didn't have proof of their immigration status, were referred to ICE. And now this situation is being investigated by New York Attorney General because that's in violation of New York State sanctuary policies. And I'm sure that you've heard this many times, unfortunately, that if you look Hispanic, chances are that you will be stopped and potentially detained by ICE and checked are much higher. And of course, here we are dealing with discrimination. So if this information is going to be confirmed during the investigation, potentially the people who were arrested may be able to effectively defend themselves in immigration proceedings if such proceedings were started against them. We call it a fruit of the poisonous tree. Their arrest would be a fruit of the poisonous tree. Lastly, I wanted to draw your attention to very inconsistent statements that President Trump and his administration are making, unfortunately. Just a couple of days later, when President Trump stated that food industry and hospitality industry should not be rated by ICE. Now we have very different information from DHS saying that no industry will be safe from ICE enforcement. All right. And of course, it's a stressful situation for business owners and for workers. And basically, during this ICE raids, what's happening, most of them are going to take place in connection with what's called I-9 checkups, when Department of Justice, ICE, on behalf of the Department of Justice, basically ICE comes in and asks the employers to produce those I-9 forms, which is a necessary form for every worker in the United States. It's not anything new. These I-9 forms were required starting in the 1980s. But of course, many businesses do not have them. And usually when there is a checkup, the business should receive a notice of that. But recently what's going on is that there are just random ICE raids against the businesses. We saw it with construction industry, right? When construction workers were arrested right at the job site. There are reports that people are being arrested even in restaurants due to some ICE tips. Somebody calls ICE and says that, hey, here there are undocumented workers, and ICE comes there because now they have a lead, right? So things like that. And that's where we're at right now. I'm not sure who's going to be collecting that crap in the months if everybody's going to be leaving, if everybody's going to be afraid. But this is what's happening right now with regard to the enforcement. And you just need to be aware of that, and you need to be prepared more than ever. And on my social media, I do have tips. American Immigration Lawyers Association also published such tips as to what to do in case of the enforcement, what increases chances of you being detained, where you may be detained, like in courts, for example. If you have a check-in appointment, what do you need to do prior to going for that appointment, right? What legal outlets you have to potentially stop the physical deportation, even though they may not be granted when ICE is seeking to meet its quota. But nevertheless, it would be a good idea, for example, if you have an order of removal against you and you also have a potential of fixing your status by, let's say, filing a motion to reopen or appeal, you file for something called administrative stay of removal, also motion to stay removal proceedings, things like that. Okay, so there are things that one may file even if they have already order of removal. Another thing that you need to be aware of is that in certain situations, when you're placed in removal proceedings, you may qualify for the relief which otherwise you would not qualify for, such as cancellation of removal and withholding of removal. Those two you can file for only if you are in deportation or removal proceedings. And many of you will qualify for that. But guess what? Please prepare the documents now, because if you are detained, it takes time to get out of the detention, and your attorney may need to have records available to argue that bond or submit certain applications requests before ICE. Just keep that in mind, right? That it's always good to be prepared. Another very important relief that is overlooked by many is a T visa, visa for victims of human trafficking. Please understand that sometimes if you were brought into will, for example, or under deceit, right? Even by your romantic partner, you may qualify for that T visa if certain conditions are met. You may qualify for the T visa if you were abused at work. If, let's say, you were forced to work, deceived to accept certain very undesirable working conditions, and it all happened because of your immigration status. So speak with a lawyer, see what chances you may have. I think it's well worth it to check if you have any opportunity to remain in the United States and receive status legally, which is very, very important. And now, guys, I will be answering your questions. So let me see what we have. What's going on with you? I hope all of you are safe. I hope you are happy as much as you can be, right? Life goes on. There is a lot of craziness in the world, so at least we can say that the United States is one of the safest countries so far. So thank God for that. In terms of different conflicts that are going on, international conflicts. Not in terms of immigration, unfortunately, right now. So let's see. Hi, guys on TikTok. Thank you very much for your hearts. Thank you for your love. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Will ICE detain immigrants with valid work permits? Yes, sometimes they can do that because valid work permit does not necessarily mean you have status. You may be temporarily detained and then released, or you may be not released. For example, I'm going to give you an example. Somebody who entered the United States on a CBP-1 parole, they may have their work permits taken away, or the sunset for their work permits may be coming up. But those people, ICE is treating as people subject to expedited removal. So technically, a person may have valid work permit for some time, but at the same time, if ICE cancels their parole, they will be subject to those expedited removal proceedings where you cannot ask for bond and you will remain in detention until your case is fully heard. All right, so there are some other examples. Let's say you are an applicant for asylum, affirmative applicant for asylum, and you filed for that, you have the work permit, but ICE nevertheless may detain you temporarily until you qualify for bond and then release you. So keep this in mind, okay? Hi, Coco. Would you recommend taking a road trip from the Midwest to East Coast with everything that's going on? Would I recommend a road trip? No. The more you drive, the greater the chances that you may commit some traffic violation. Even the best drivers sometimes lose their attention, right? And they start speeding, especially if it's a long trip. And then the greater the chances that you may be stopped. And guess what's going to happen if you're in a jurisdiction that cooperates with ICE just because you had this little speeding ticket, you may end up in detention and deportation, right? Hi, Akansha. How long does citizenship take? About 8 months, usually. Mhm. Hi, Fazal. How long is U visa process? filed my application in 2020. Your visa process probably is going to take about 7 years if you file it in 2020. The problem with the U visa that the backlog is growing every year. All right, it's growing and growing, so it's going to take a long time. But T visa, for example, doesn't have that backlog. But it's harder to qualify for the T visa because very special conditions must be met. Can I travel to Norway with my green card? It expires in 2031. You mean, can you travel to Norway and you would not have to apply for a Norwegian visa? I wouldn't know because your citizenship here matters. But otherwise, you may travel anywhere you want, right? You just have to check the local rules. If your passport that you currently you hold allows you to travel Norway, right? All right. Let's see. Thank you guys very much for your gifts. Thank you, Teruliki. Let's see. Thank you guys for sharing the stream as well. Hi, hey, Kicks. Will TPS be cancelled? For some countries, unfortunately, it will be. For some countries, it will be. United States Supreme Court actually allowed President Trump to do so, his administration. However, from what I understand, and I'm not sure only about Cameroon, I think. Most of the countries whose TPS is set to expire, there is a litigation going on, all right? And it may be that if a federal judge orders something otherwise, you guys will be saved, all right? For most countries. All right. Let's see. Hi, Relic. Are all of them on US soil and do they have access to attorneys where they are? Who are you referring to? Let me know who you're referring to. Those who are on US soil. What's going on with EOIR? A case appeal was received on May 14th, 2019, and it's currently pending. Wow, Wesley, that's a very long time. I guess maybe your case became a victim of pandemic situation if it was in 2019. Typically, an appeal would take about 2 years, typically, all right? But 2019, that's like 6 years at this point. So I think your attorney have to maybe remind Board of Immigration Appeals that something is pending there. Unless it's not in your interest. Okay, sometimes it's not in your interest, I'll be honest. Hi, Chris. May I renew my work permit even if they didn't renew it? Who they who didn't renew your work permit? Not sure. Give me some more information, all right? So I'll be able to answer the question. Hi, Maria. How will people prepare for the bond? All right, so let's say you do qualify for bond. You're not subject to mandatory detention. Typically, to file for the bond, you would have to show that you're not danger to the public safety, right? And you're not a risk of flight, meaning that you will show up for your hearing. Well, the government looks, first of all, at your background, your previous criminal, potentially arrests or convictions. Then they look at your family ties, your job ties with the community. If you've been paying taxes and if previously you followed up and you didn't miss any of your appointments if you had any. That's what they're looking at. And then, of course, the big question will be how much money you have to pay. That's why you probably need a lawyer sometimes, even though lawyers charge money for their work. But trust me, there is a big difference if you're ordered to pay $25,000 or $35,000 and $5,000 to $1,500. All right, for the bond. So bond amount may be set by the judge and may vary from $1,500 to all the way up. I think there is no real limit. It has to be reasonable under the circumstances. But I've heard once that there was a bond at 100K. I don't know how they paid it, but maybe they had the means. Okay. All right. Hello, Link Pro. All right. Let's see if we have more questions. Yes, EOIR, guys, is undergoing. This is Executive Office of Immigration Review, and immigration courts. They are undergoing through tremendous changes. Okay, the memos that are being enforced, the way the judges should act, not in your favor. I'm telling you this right now. Okay. So you have to be very proactive. You have to be on top of every little thing with your immigration case. I always advise clients to check, unless there is a set date already, to check if they've been scheduled for any hearing. It's very easy to do so if you go to EOIR case status link and punch in your A number. Why it's important to do that? Currently, lots of cases that were administratively closed, practically all of them, are being reopened. You may ask me, but how is it possible to do so? Because there are literally maybe hundreds of thousands of cases like that over the years, right? Accumulated. Well, the government apparently hired contractors who are helping them out, because I've seen those motions to reopen signed, so affidavits of service signed by the contractor. And it means that they're just sending those very similar looking motions, and then you're going to have 10 days to try to object to it. Sometimes you're going to have very strong reasonable objections. Maybe your immigrant visa is ready or going to be ready soon. Maybe you filed for some other relief, and it will be a waste of government's time to reopen the case just to close it the next month, right? So whatever is happening, it may be in your best interest to object. I would recommend strongly try doing that in every case if you can. But again, it can be tricky because you may receive paperwork from your old attorney too late. All right. And you may miss that deadline. Nevertheless, try to object together with what we call motion to accept untimely filing. Hey, if you have a particular friendly judge, they may accept it. Will they listen to you? Not necessarily, but at least it's going to be in the record. Administrations come and go in America, as you've seen. And if your case is pending for long enough, you may use that objection at some point later in your immigration life. Currently, if the case is reopened, at least in New York, most cases are going to be scheduled for individual hearings. Try to guess. Well, you type your answer in the chat, and I will answer this question in the end. All right. What year most of the individual hearings in New York are scheduled for, and in New Jersey too? And I think they're all high. Matroshka Polly, how long does bona fide determination takes for a U visa? If you filed your U visa recently, it's not going to take more than 3 to 4 months. But if you filed a while ago, it may take longer to receive that. All right. High pressure. I-20 got terminated because a low GPA due to medical reasons. I'm sorry to hear that. So if that happened, consider reinstatement. Perhaps you'll be able to get that I-20 reinstated in your F1 status. All right. Hi, CEO US. They're treating overstay just like illegal crossings. No, overstay is different from illegal crossings. Overstay people, they're people who were inspected and admitted, and then they overstayed their um, authorized time in the United States. But those who entered without inspection, um, they don't have that inspection or admission or parole. So it's two different groups of people, all right? Let's see. Oh, I have a lot of questions. With the pause on green card applications, what does it mean for asylees who were granted asylum? Well, if you received your asylum truthfully, right, there was no fraud involved, you don't need to worry much about that pause, because once it's lifted, it will be lifted at some point. You will be able to receive your green card, provided the government is not going to send you a notice to terminate your asylum due to changed country conditions. This is a very, very important point, guys. Okay, just keep that in mind. So you have to always update your address with USCIS, because if they send you any type of notice like that, you're going to have very limited time to respond. And if you miss that deadline to respond, they will just by default issue a decision. So just watch out for that. Okay. Can you tell us some of your immigration secrets as a part of your secret society no one knows about? Immigration secrets as a part of the immigration society. If you were watching all of my videos, you would know all of my secrets by now. But I do have more than 1,000 videos, so it's going to take you a long time. Secrets. Well, it's hard for me to tell you. You know, the biggest secret actually is that the success of your case depends on, probably, however bad it sounds, how smart your lawyer is and how hardworking, and who is your judge or USCIS officer. Because I've seen situations where somehow people with what I saw as a good case, but they went with some other lawyer, lost their cases. And I have no idea how it happened, honestly. I just look at it and I'm like, why? Why it happened that your lawyer didn't tell you that, you have to really pay attention to this aspect of your case, not the other one? How did this happen that they didn't object to something that the judge said, so it would give you grounds for appeal later, right? And I've seen cases, well, I personally handled some of them where I thought, such a weak case. However, we're gonna win it. I'm just gonna try to do my best, and the case was granted. So that's probably the biggest secret. And unfortunately, as a person, you you wouldn't probably know in advance, right? Who to go to, what to do. You basically trust online reviews, so you trust your friends, and that's just the hardest part of your immigration case in the United States, right? To choose the right lawyer, and of course to have some sort of luck. Because imagine this, people who filed their cases prior to Trump's administration coming in, some of them, they got approvals for the cases that this administration is not going to approve. So how would you call it? What would you call it, right? It's some sort of luck, timing, I guess. Some people got their cases dismissed in court, and they got a chance of staying in the United States and adjusting status with USCIS. And other people didn't get this chance because timing of the hearings, or again, lawyers didn't do the job on time, things like that. So that's the biggest secret. The rest is basically the mechanics. The biggest secret is to know what to do, what to say, what not to say, and when, right? And the rest is the implementation of your strategy, all right? I wish I knew something that, I could tell you more precisely, so that you will say, oh my gosh, I shared this secret. Here, one secret. We use AILA a lot for practice advisories, American Immigration Law Association. But guess what? Public may not have access to the same practice advisories that attorneys may have. All right. Hi, 3 official Dominique. Thank you for your gift. Let's see what other interesting questions we have. So you guys guessing what year most individual hearings are going to take place now? If you see the judge today or like within this month, come on, type it up. Hi Jay, I have asylum hearing, but my father is filing probably I-130. Do I have to go back to court? Do you have to go back to court? You always have to go back to court unless the judge cancels your hearing date. It's extremely important to understand that. If you're under 21 years old, your father's filing may help you But if you are above 21 years old, that I-130 priority date is going to take 80 years or more, depending on whether you are married or not. So chances are that I-130, if you're an adult, is not going to stop the court from moving forward with your what we call merit hearing, individual hearing. All right. So we have one answer, 2025. All right. You guys have more answers? Let's see. What happened if you have a final removal order from years ago but have a prima facie now? Well, how did you receive it prima facie? Is it based on VAWA? First of all, you may file for a motion to reopen based on that, okay? If it's VAWA related. If it's something else, you still may file a motion to reopen, right? Provided that whatever that you're filing for opens up the door for your status in the United States. So work with an attorney, see what's going on. You can always ask for a stay of removal due to that determination that you have. Why? Because you say, well, I have an ability to later fix my status if the case is approved. So you may have a chance, all right? Hi, Bamba. I have a US passport. Can I travel out of the country and come back? Listen, of course, you have a US passport. What can stop you? Guys, typically, if you're a US citizen, you should not be afraid of traveling, unless there is always something, right? There is this famous blog on TikTok who likes to have his videos, and he always says, until. So, unless you need to be aware that on your way back to the United States, your electronic devices may be searched. And if you don't want that to happen for whatever reason, then don't take your devices or don't travel. All right. But you have a right to be admitted to the United States as a US citizen. If you are naturalized US citizen and you are afraid that during the coming back, somehow USCIS is going to focus on your case and the way you received citizenship and green card, they will still have to let you in to the country. But later, let's say something triggers this checkup and so on and so forth, they may start denaturalization proceedings against the person who they believed received their status and citizenship illegally. That's a whole different, another story, all right? And not necessarily that your travel is going to trigger that, but usually travel by a US citizen is absolutely safe and doesn't trigger anything, except for maybe a little bit of a stress. It's been reported that certain people are being detained or were detained even though they were US citizens at the border. Usually it was connected, related to TSA. They were trying to transport something in their luggage, which they were not supposed to, like some sort of plants, some prohibited items like food, or they made large purchases of clothing and things, and government thought that they're like doing something that they should have declared and they didn't declare, things like that, but not necessarily related to the immigration situation. All right. Hi, Konstantin. What is the best reasons for granted motion to change venue immigration court from Florida to New York? All right, so you would like to file a motion to change your court venue jurisdiction, right? From Florida to New York. All you need to do that you moved and that your hearing, your merit hearing, is so far away that the government is not going to be prejudiced if the motion is granted. You do need to show that you really moved, right? And depending on where you stand in your case process, you may have to submit your written pleadings with the motion, right? That's what it is. But all you need to show is that you really, really moved. Let's see if we have more messages. What can you do if your work permit was denied based on your time or your clock? Hi, Mr. K. So your asylum clock, I assume, was stopped. Didn't you? What happened? You moved, or you didn't come in for your interview, or you asked for more time in connection with your master calendar or something during your master calendar. So what happens here is that if the clock stopped correctly for a good reason, nothing you can do unless you're going to eliminate the delay that caused the clock to stop. If the clock stopped incorrectly because you really did not cause the delay, or you eliminated the delay, you showed up for the next master, things like that, then what you need to do if you're in court, you have to reach out to the court administrator, your lawyer has to, and see what they can do about your clock. If you are with USCIS, you can file a motion to reopen, pointing out to them that they're wrong and you're right. All right? That's what you need to do. Asylum. Hi, Abu Ibrahim. Asylum case, second interview 3 weeks ago. The decision is still pending. What do you think? Well, it's very normal for the decision after asylum interview to be pending for a long time. In about 10 to 15 years ago, it was actually an indication that your case is going to be granted, because it was taking longer for the officers to do the background checks and approve the case. Now I'm not sure, I'll be honest, but 3 weeks is nothing. 3 weeks is nothing, okay? Let's see if we have more questions. Hi, Juan and Eve. I sent my RFU response 60 days ago. It was delivered to USCIS. They told me they haven't scanned it. Oh, if they received it, you should be okay. Not sure who said that they haven't scanned it, right? Not sure what it is. But the main thing is to have proof. Always submit. If you mail the documents, to USCIS, always submit them, mail them with tracking, so you can prove that they received your files. And then you'll be all right, okay? Follow up with them. If you have a USCIS account, you can upload the letter saying, hey, I'm following up. Here is the proof that it was delivered. But if they didn't just scan it to your account, I wouldn't be worrying about that at all. It doesn't mean anything, to be honest. Okay. Hi, Marky. Will ICE detain immigrants with outstanding I-130 and I-45 petition in process? Usually not, unless there is a criminal charge of some sort, charge or conviction, or there was something else going on. Usually they won't. Most cases will be fine, all right? Okay, let's see. Is it true that immigration always give you 6 months to stay in the United States? No, it's not true. If you're referring to B1, B2 entrance, visitor entrance, how long you're going to stay in the United States is determined by the CBP officer who is inspecting you during your coming in to the United States. And it is true that most people will receive the maximum time of 6 months, but some people will not. If the officer believes that you're not entirely truthful, or that your true purpose of coming to the United States is not tourism or visiting, but nevertheless he's not really convinced that it's something else, like he doesn't really have evidence of fraud, he may ask you, so what are you going to do here in the United States? And the person says, well, I'm going to be visiting my cousin for the wedding. When is the wedding? July 4th. All right, so you know what? I'm going to give you till July 10th to remain in the United States. And that's what is going to be indicated in your I-94, all right? So then it's going to be very hard to impossible to extend that stay or change status, because usually they also mark in your passport, no change of status, no adjustment of status in such situations. Even though those notes are not really coming from USCIS, very often USCIS is going to take them into consideration when later you are trying to file for something, if you will. All right, that's what's happening. Hi, chicken wing. Can Medi-Cal really share status with ICE? I really don't know. I think this is a California specific question. I genuinely think that insurance places like that do not share information, especially in sanctuary jurisdictions, but we may not know everything. Why? For example, in sanctuary jurisdiction of Chicago, it was revealed that whenever there is an arrest made by local law enforcement, the information about the person is automatically transferred to something called SAFE system, and it's connected to federal database. So basically, ICE knew when people would be getting arrested just because of this sharing thing. But it was revealed that that's what's happening like several months ago, right? And before, people didn't know that that's how it works. So I do not know what information Medi-Cal may be sharing with the federal government, I'll be honest. What happens if an illegal is caught on the street in a sanctuary city, caught by ICE? They will arrest the person. They don't have to have a warrant to arrest you if you're in a public place, as long as they have, I think they call it reasonable suspicion or probable cause to believe you're here legally. Okay? That's what it is. With the pause, okay, of green card applications, yes, we spoke about that. The green card applications are paused if they're filed by asylum beneficiaries, but at some point they will, the pause will be lifted, right? Hi, Khan. I came yesterday from Thailand. Trust me, there is no problems not checking the phones. They don't check the phones of everyone, but I trust that you didn't have a problem. But there are overwhelming media reports that some people are being checked, and you need to know about that. All right, especially if you somebody who loves spending time online, sharing your thoughts, you may be checked. All right, and I'm telling you, just be mindful of what you're posting online. I know sometimes it's very, very hard to stay quiet, but just keep that in mind. Hi, Ayat. Tell me if you can help me. I won 2021 lottery. Can you take care of my problem? I'm married woman with children. Do I have a chance of getting my green card? Ayat, unfortunately, your time to use that Divi lottery selection passed a long time ago. And once it passes, you cannot take it back. There was a little exception for the people who were part of a class action lawsuit during the pandemic, and I think related mostly to first Trump's administration visa ban, but that was it. And I think eventually most people were not able to restore those victories for the purposes to come to the United States. What happens with a visa lottery is that you receive a quota that is allocated for a specific year, and you must receive your visa within that allocated year. If you do not, it burns, it disappears. So all I can tell you is that you should try your luck again, and hopefully this time around there will be no issues like that. Okay? All right. Let's see if we have more questions, guys. Thank you very much for your hearts, and thank you very much for your gifts online and your participation. Again, I hope that you're going to follow me so that next time we see each other again, right? Hi, James. Submit other paperwork under unsolicited evidence for RFE. Would it affect my case? I don't know. I mean, just because you're submitting unsolicited evidence, they will not deny your case. I'm going to tell you that. Whether or not they will take that evidence into consideration is a different issue. There are, interestingly enough, categories of cases where you can basically send evidence to government at any time, like VAWA, you can submit additional evidence in your pending VAWA case, even if you know you didn't submit it initially. That's very interesting, right? But it's a very special category of case, Violence Against Women Act. What happens, hi Munzil, what happens if USPS loses my EET? It's a nightmare, I'll be honest. If it is a post office that lost your work permit, the government is going to tell you that you have to reapply for it again and potentially now pay the fee because it wasn't their fault that the work permit was lost. I'm just letting you know this, okay? So hopefully they will be able to find it. I hope. Try to speak to the supervisor at the postal office. See if they can. If you have tracking, you'll be able to restore that record. All right. Hi Rajiv. I have a question. I am supposed to apply for work authorization. Is it good to? Where is your question? Where did it go? Is it good to do what? Well, if you're qualified for the work permit, you should file for it. Absolutely. Okay. I just think that the second part of your question got lost, but yes, you should file. You should file for your work permit. Hi and no man. I have I-130 for my wife. She's waiting for interview. Do I have to submit my tax documents every year? I guess for every year. Well, if your wife can adjust your status, you were supposed to submit at least one tax return with your form I-864, right? And we usually ask clients to submit 3 latest tax returns. So you don't have to submit all of them, but either 3 latest or at least 1 latest tax return. Depends on your situation. All right? Okay. Hi, Ken Bummer. There is a 2024 study on the Asylum Office in Virginia in which it was argued that for each case the office adjudicates, it adds 2 more to its backlog. What will happen to all of those who are in a very long wait? Well, there is a study from Brooklyn Law School that says that unfortunately what happens in New York Asylum Office is that they just deny cases because it's faster for them to do so than approve cases, even if they know that the case should be approved. What's going to happen? You guys are going to be stuck in a backlog up until it's going to be resolved. That's what's going on. Or the government may just adopt a different way to handle the backlog by issuing without the interview notices to appear and sending you to courts, which I think is not going to benefit anybody. But just so you understand, they do have a lot of control over immigration, the way they handle cases, but most people are going to be stuck in backlog. All right? All right. Hi, Rizul. I have a pending asylum case and recently filed an I-130 for marriage. Due to a 1-month status gap after my F1 expired, I was told I may need consular processing. Well, if your grace period expired, your F1 expired, and you were not in lawful non-immigrant status at the time when your I-130, I guess, preference-based was current, then your adjustment of status is likely not going to be approved. All right, there are very few exceptions, but in most cases, not going to be approved. Now, to make sure that this is the correct answer, I would advise you to consult with an attorney showing your paperwork with dates, right? Because here it's impossible to consult you guys. I'm just giving you little tips here and there. This is not a consultation. It's very, very important to understand that. We're publicly sharing some information, all right? Hi, Sikander. Can you provide some insights into the F2A category? We did see some movement for 8 months. Do you see any movement for this fiscal year? I only see what public sees. You open visibility and you look at the priority date, right? And you can look at previous visibility months and see what the movement was. But F2A is not current, and I don't anticipate it to be current this year, even though you never know. Sometimes we think that it's not going to be current, and then the next visibility comes in, and we see that it is it's moved a lot, right? Hi, Tulji, is it true that green card holders are not allowed to do what? To leave the United States? No, it's not true. You can leave the United States. It's not advisable, generally speaking, to travel, but most people will be absolutely fine when they have a green card and they're traveling. People who shouldn't be traveling, those who had criminal issues in the past, shouldn't be traveling, all right? Who shouldn't be traveling? Those who had some problems when they were receiving green cards should be traveling. If potentially you may be accused of marriage fraud or receiving your green card incorrectly, if there could have been issues with the priority date, which very often happens in preference-based categories, that the government issues green cards, it's government's mistake. They issue the green card incorrectly, but somehow it comes to light that the green card was issued incorrectly for the first time during your coming back to the United States. And those of you who are conditional permanent residents waiting for the condition to be removed, you probably shouldn't be traveling. Why? Because if your petition is denied while you are abroad, you will be placed in removal proceedings upon return. Just please understand that. Okay? Just understand that. All right, let's see if we have more questions. Okay. Hi, Sugar. If asylum got approved, what time does it take to apply for a green card? Well, this question is very often asked. Currently, the law allows you to pre-file for a green card prior to you waiting the full 1 year in the United States. But if you file too early and the government adjudicates your case prior to you accumulating 1 year of physical presence in the United States, your application will be denied. Well, another point to remember that right now, unfortunately, the government stopped processing of green card applications filed by asylum beneficiaries, right? That's another problem, but you know. Hi, Marquis. How to make corrections on Form I-45? Send in, if the form was already submitted, send in what called typographical error service request, requesting that USCIS makes corrections to your answers. Very often, it's going to resolve your issue, and it's like you submitted it this way. Well, guys, thank you very much for your questions. Thank you for your time. Thank you for participation, for sharing and liking these videos and following. I hope that all of you are going to be safe, and I hope that you're going to enjoy this week as much as you can, and we're going to see each other again, hopefully on Friday night. Don't forget to follow, so we're going to stay connected, and I hope to see you soon.